Okay, so let's start talking about what it is that we're going to talk about today. And the first thing is going to be navigation. Now, I realize for some people that's going to be a little remedial. That's okay. I'll probably still tell you a couple of things that you weren't aware of before. Okay, I think maybe that static went away. Then we're going to talk about creating a requisition and routing it for approval. Now, some people who have been creating requisitions for a long time, pay close attention because there's some things that are probably going to be different than what you've seen before. We're also going to talk about approving a requisition for those of you that are approving managers. But even if you are not, again, pay close attention because it is always helpful to know what it is that the people approving your requisition are looking for. That will be very beneficial to you. So we'll cover exactly how you get those notices and what you do with them. Then we're going to go over support resources because inevitably there's going to come a time when you think, all right, that Sam guy talked about this in training and I have no idea what he said. So where do you go to get the help and the support that you need? And then at the very end, we'll open it up for Q&A again. Okay, so let's talk about navigation in the system. I'm going to do this two ways. I'm going to go over a little bit of information in a PowerPoint, but I know we've all had enough of death by PowerPoint over the last many years, so I try not to spend too much time doing that and actually get into the live demonstration as well. But when you log in, you, of course, see the Recruiting Center as you've all seen before. There's a couple of things that I want to point out. First of all, I get questions sometimes, but how come as a manager I don't see the search candidate option? That's because that's only an option for recruiters. As many times as we would tell managers, you do not search candidates and contact them directly, you know, somebody would still do it. So for that reason, managers just don't have access to that button. Over on the right-hand side, this has just brand new, newly been added, which is the help links over on the right. We finally worked out all of the issues we were having with getting those things populated, but now they are there. And if you have questions about a function, you don't have to get out of here and go to the training site. You can just click the links over here on the right-hand side, take you straight into the written guide, the video, whatever it is that you're looking for. But there's a bunch of good information that's over there. Creating requisitions, obviously you guys probably all know where that is. You just click that little button right there. There is something, though, that I want you to do, not right now, but after we get finished here, and that is to go into the My Setup area. They've reconfigured this recently, so there is a new My Setup button down here at the bottom left. But you can also go through resources at the top and click My Setup here. Either way will take you to the same place. When you get there, go to the Preferences tab and then click Edit. And you can scroll down to number 4, the Requisitions section, and be sure, if you haven't already done this, be sure that you put your own name in here as the default hiring manager, because if you do that, every time you fill out a requisition, it will populate that for you. Now, different organizations work differently. If you work with the same recruiter every time, then you can do the same thing with the recruiter information. Put his or her information in here, it'll populate that for you. If your recruiter is not consistently the same person, then you probably want to leave that blank, and you'll just fill that in as you go along each time you do a requisition. There's another thing as long as I'm here. If you go to the General tab, I don't have a screenshot of it, but if you go to the General tab, be sure that the eShare is checked and the notifications block is checked. You might just want to make a note of that if I don't have a screenshot. But make sure those two things are checked, which enables the system to send you emails at the right time in case there's something that you need to be notified of, or if there's a step in the process you need to take. Be sure that those two boxes are checked. Again, it's on the general screen right at the very top. There's a box in the top left and a box over on the middle right. Be sure when we get done that you have those two checked as well. And then when you're finished, just click Save and Close. And to give you a view of how that looks, I'm going to log into Careers. Again, you can start with, let me close this. You can start with either My Setup, or you can go up to Resources, use the drop down, go into My Setup. I'm going to click Edit, and let's go to Preferences, and then Edit. There we go. These are the two boxes that I said I wanted you to make sure you had. Enable eShare, Workflow Event Notification. Make sure you have those. If you speak multiple languages, you can include that information here. If you wish to receive your correspondence in a language other than English, open that up, change your drop down here. Kind of explore this a little bit. There's some other things in there that are very helpful, but again, the one I want to make sure that you that you ensure that you get done is to put your information into the default hiring manager field, because again, that way it populates for you. Again, there's other things that you can go in here and look. If there's somebody that you collaborate with frequently on requisitions, those people that are frequent, and we don't really use this too much. I've seen people fill it out, but other than general and preferences, frequent collaborators is probably really the only one that applies to most of the people in the company. But again, make sure that you have those things set, because it is kind of a time-saving feature for you. Anywhere you are in the system, you can always go back to the home page just by clicking the recruiting button. So that's all there is for my setup. Quick and painless. Let's move on to some of the real meat of what we're going to talk about today and get into creating the requisition and routing it for approval. So again, starting from the home screen, two different places, and you can see just from what I showed you a minute ago, they reconfigure some things from time to time. You can see that things have been rearranged here, but it's the same information, just located in a different area. So you can either click on Create Requisition, or you can click the Create Requisition button here, take you to exactly the same place. When you get here, they have finally, very happy about the fact that they have narrowed this down now so that everybody should only be seeing two options, GEMS and Pipeline. For managers, GEMS is the only option. Just pretend like that other one isn't even down there. GEMS is all we use. So leave that selected, click Next, and you'll get to putting in the predefined data. The first field is the requisition template. There's a couple of different ways that you can do this. If you hire frequently, and some people only do it a couple of times a year, so they wouldn't have it memorized. If you hire frequently and you just know what that requisition template is, you can start typing it in, and it'll bring up possibilities for you. Just click the right one. If you don't, you just click the search icon here, and it will open up your search window. You can type in a partial ID, type in a requisition title, and do your search that way. Once you get your ID, and we'll talk about this a little more, but once you get your ID, try and stick with either the job description that's already in there, or be sure if you're going to change the job description, and you'll hear me say this more than once, if you're going to change the job description, please be sure that you've gone through the proper channels to make sure that that has been approved. I have seen crazy, borderline unlawful things that have been put into requisition job descriptions before. So be sure you're not doing that. Be sure that you get that completely vetted and you have an approval, and I'd ask for that approval in writing before you make changes to the job descriptions there. So you find what it is that you find the job description that you're looking for, then you move down to the cost center. Now, I don't see as many problems as we had before, but there's still times when an incorrect cost center, an improperly formatted cost center is entered. Here's what it is that you need to look for. All the entries begin with a two-letter country code. US is pretty simple. India, MX for Mexico, whatever it is, they're all going to start with a two-letter country code, and they're going to end in 001. If you see something that does not look like this format, it is not a correctly formatted cost center, and it will cause a problem in GEMS, and somebody will have to go and manually fix that later. There's still some in there, and I think they're getting rid of them as quickly as they can. That may just be the two-letter country code and then a 4- or 5-digit number after that. Those are not valid cost centers anymore. Be sure that it has the long sequence in the middle and it ends in 101. That's what it has to be. So you put your cost center in, click the Next button, and then you move on to the last three areas of the predefined field. Organization and job field, those should be populating for you based on the previous information. But the one we want to talk about is the primary location. Country only is an insufficient entry, and it will cause a problem when this goes to transfer information into GEMS. It has got to be a completely formatted location. Again, otherwise, it's going to cause a backup in the system. There's going to be an error report on the HR end, and somebody's going to have to go in and make a manual adjustment. So be sure that when you get to this primary location, you open the selector box and you do a search. I use city because that's just easiest for me. If you find something that works better for you, that's okay, as long as we all end up in the same place. But what you're looking for is a completely formatted location that includes country, state or province, city, and the work location. Now, I know sometimes, not most of the time, but sometimes there are positions that could be filled in more than one spot. So you can change this up until the time that you're about to make an offer. This can be adjusted very far into the process. You can still go back in and make a change. That's okay. But it would be better to have a location that needs to be changed than to cause an error in GEMS because the right information wasn't put in. So again, just be sure that you're filling this out completely. And again, if you could have somebody that could either be in Phoenix or Salt Lake City, you can go back in if you choose Phoenix and the person you hire is in Salt Lake, okay, you can go back in and change that later. But just to be sure, make sure that you put a complete location in there from the beginning. So it should look like this. You click Create, that forms the skeleton, forms the bones of the requisition here, and then you need to fill in the detail. Now, as I go through this, if you look at this screen and you say, okay, now I don't have that field, or you see a field that you have that I don't have, that's okay. Don't let that throw you off because your template may look slightly different than this. That's fine. The procedures are the same. That is, anything that has a red asterisk is mandatory. The system will not let you go past without it. Other fields that are not mandatory may be required for your organization, or it may be a key piece of information that goes into GEMS even if it's not mandatory. So if you know that information and it applies to you, be sure that you fill that in because, again, if you don't, somebody's going to have to later on, and that can just delay either the posting of the requisition or the onboarding of your new hire. So again, if you take a couple of extra seconds and do it right from the beginning, it can save lots of time on the back end. So you'll start off with new requisition here. Your status will be in draft, basic information here. If you're in a country where you're using multiple languages, then you can open this drop down and you can add the other languages. For most people, that really isn't an issue. That only applies a handful of cases. So if we scroll down a little farther, we get to the GEMS fields. And this is one of those areas that I was kind of talking about where fields are not mandatory, but yet some of them are very important. These are not marked as mandatory because not every field is mandatory for every country or every organization. They do apply in some and they don't apply in others. As a manager, it's your responsibility to know which fields apply to your group. Some people are going to have to put in a notice period, others don't. Some have probation, again, others don't. You have to know what it is that applies to you. So work with your local HR to determine the applicable fields, and those that do apply, make sure that they are filled out completely and accurately, because again, if you don't, somebody's going to have to do it on the back end, and it just causes delays in your requisition. So know what applies, make sure that it's in there. We move down a little bit more, and we get to the owners of the requisition. Again, if you have put your name in that My Setup area I showed you, it will be included here. Same with recruiter. If you work with the same recruiter every time, put it in My Setup. If not, you can do it manually when you get to this point. If you have a hiring manager assistant, somebody that you want to have complete and full access to this requisition, you can put them in the hiring manager assistant. It doesn't give them the ability to access all of your requisitions, just this one. Recruiter assistant, leave that blank. That if that's required, then the recruiter will put that in on their own. Moving down a little more, we see structure. Now, this is your opportunity to look at this and make sure that it is complete and to make final adjustments. If you have an organization that just has 2 lines, you need to edit that and make sure that the organization is complete. If you somehow skipped over filling in primary location, again, click Edit and make sure that you have all 4 of the components, as well as double checking, making sure your cost center is correct as well. All of this can be adjusted here without having to start over. If we move down a little bit more, again, not all fields are mandatory, but all of them are important if they apply to you. So even things like travel, which isn't a mandatory field, make sure that you fill this out. And of course, job type, employment type, those are mandatory anyway. Pre-screening, you'll never mess with this area. That's something that the recruiters have been trained to do. They use the pre-screening questions to pre-qualify candidates to kind of narrow the pool down to those that really need to be closely looked at and for consideration. Managers don't mess with the pre-screening area. Same with screening. Some people do drug tests, some do background checks, some do both, some do neither. This is something that the recruiters will take care of, so you don't need to worry about screening. And then the final section is additional information. If there is a note that you want to just make sure that is recorded, that you need to put in writing, then put that in additional information. It could be a note to a recruiter, could be information for an approving manager, farther up in the hierarchy, whatever it is, you could put that in additional information. When you're finished, if you click this diagnostic button over here on the top right-hand side, it will bring up a new little pop-up window that tells you whether or not this is complete or if there's information that is missing. Obviously, this one says that it's complete, so we would just click Save and Close. Once you do that, then your job title will populate here. And by the way, you can edit that job title. You can change that if you need to amend that in some way. But your job title will show up, the requisition number will be assigned, your status will change to draft. Then we open the More Actions drop-down menu. We click Request Approval. And if I get everybody to, again, put your phones on mute because I'm hearing background conversation. If you open the drop-down menu, click on Request Approval. The correct names will appear in this area. Comments are mandatory. Your name will show up as already having been approved, obviously, as the hiring manager. And then this sequential process starts where it sends them one step at a time. Every time an approval is reached, the next person gets notification, next person, et cetera, et cetera. If there's an error in here, if it requires an additional level of approval that's not showing up, you can always click Add Approver and do a search as you've seen before, and you could add additional approvers. Again, that should be very rare because those hierarchies are well established by now. Okay, so once you route it for approval, it will automatically take you to the Approvals tab, and you'll see your name and then all of the other names underneath that that are next in line to approve. You'll have their decisions as they are made and the date and time plus any comments. So let's take a look at what this looks like live. I'm going to start with Create Requisition. Again, leave gems. And we start with the requisition template. Again, if you know the name of the requisition template, you can start typing in the letters and numbers and it will bring up possibilities. If you don't know the template, you can start typing in titles and it will do exactly the same thing for you. Or you can click search and you can do it that way. Cost center, budget center, I'm amazed. I've met a couple people that actually know theirs off the top of their head. I'm not that person. Start with the 2-letter country code. And in production, I believe they had improved it so that typing in US does not bring all the Russian entries up first. Here in my practice area, it still does that. So let me scroll down into, there we go. Again, we are looking for a properly formatted cost center. If I can scroll up far enough, I might be able to find what I'm talking about. Okay, you see these? If you still see these in the department number listing, these are not properly formatted. Please don't use these. You need cost centers that look like that. Again, 2-letter code in the middle, long series in the front, long series in the middle, ends with 101 at the very end. So I'm just going to pick one at random here. Next, again, organization is complete, Job field is complete. Primary location is not complete. You cannot just leave it as country only. It will absolutely 100% of the time cause an issue in GEMS after the hire has been made and that information is supposed to transition. It will absolutely cause a problem. So make sure you have a properly formatted. See that right there? Don't ever use anything like that. Be sure that you have a properly formatted location code that you're using. Create. And here we have the basic form for the requisition filled out. Now we're just going to put in the details. Legacy rec, don't worry about that, if you still see that. This was the position to have direct reports. And I used to try and put in realistic examples in here until I realized that a couple of people tried to copy them. So now I just put training example in here. Be sure that you are filling those fields out, your justification and your value to the business. Be sure that you are filling those out completely. Reason for the position. Obviously, these again are the mandatory fields. You can't get past those. Replacement. Okay, be sure that if this is a replacement for somebody, that you use that person's actual WIN ID when you get to this field. Now, I'm not going to put. I'm just going to do a search here and take the first one I can find. If anybody knows Mr. Hussein, please don't tell them that he's being replaced, because that is not true. He just happens to be the top of the list there. If producing no, newer replacement, we'll say replacement like. Again, if you have a replacement here, you need to have the WIN ID here. If this is a new role, then this would just be zeros, because it's not applicable. Hope that makes sense to everybody. Seasonal, we'll say no. Client 4, I'm going to put my same example in here. And here we have the GEMS field. Again, not every GEMS field applies to everybody that's on this call. You have to know which ones are appropriate for you and which ones aren't, and make sure that those are filled out. So again, just because you see me put a notice period in here, that doesn't mean that your organization actually has that. Type in, you can do it that way, or you can use the drop down and make your selection this way. Either way works, whatever works most comfortably for you. By the way, if you use probation period, you don't put in this and the end date. You can do one or the other, but don't put in both. FTE, important. Most of the time we're hiring full-time people, so it's a 1, that's easy. If you're hiring a part-time person, don't frustrate yourself. Remember that it has to be represented as a decimal with a 0 in the front. If I tried to put in 33%, like at the third time, that's not going to work. It's not going to take that. 50%. See, it's not going to take that. If it's a part-time, you need to put in the decimal, and that it will take. But I'm going to leave mine as 1. Employee user type, we'll say employee. Time and attendance. Again, don't get caught up on my specific examples. Do what applies for you. Payroll relationship. There we go. Okay. Well, that jumped me way down there, didn't it? Okay, so there we go. User group, you'll never have to worry about that. Recruiter, again, if you don't have that already filled in, and it's an uncommon enough surname that it's going to give you a limited amount of results, you can just type it in that way. There we go. Or if it's something that is more common, you know, Smith, Jones, Jackson, something like that, then you probably want to do a search this way. There we go. Organization, again, if something needs to be edited, you can do that very easily here. But I see my organization is complete. My location is complete. Get back up there. My job field looks good. I have the right cost center, so we're moving on. Travel, no. Job type. Target start date, again, this is one of those areas that's not mandatory, but it really is helpful for you to put that in because the recruiter really, really would like to know what that target start date is. So again, just be thorough. Language, that's another thing. When we do recruiter training, this is not a mandatory field, and you might think, well, if I'm in America, obviously it has to be English or whatever your country is. But we teach the recruiters, just take a look at this, because if the manager is not putting that in, it's not mandatory, but if they're not putting it in, it's an indication that they may just be kind of, skimming through here as fast as they can and may miss something. So again, it's not mandatory, but it's a key that indicates that the person is being very thorough. Here's one. I get some questions sometimes. If you have a question about this, hang on afterwards. Minimum and maximum salary. I've heard people that have said, well, we just put in zeros and let the recruiter fill that in. That's not the best practice. That's not the way that we are supposed to do things. You need to know what that minimum and maximum salary range is. You as the manager need to be putting in that information. Make up some numbers here. Pay basis, we're just going to leave that as yearly. Now, again, I know some people say, well, but we don't pay yearly. We don't pay. This is not the field right there that is feeding GEMS, but it does feed into the offer grid that the recruiter is using, and they have a built-in calculator. And when they calculate, when they do the math for the offer grid, they base it on the yearly pay basis. So just leave this as yearly, and then the recruiter will make the correct change in the offer grid, because that is what's actually going to feed the information into GEMS. And for those countries that create their offer letters that way, that's where the information feeds into the offer letter. So just leave pay basis as yearly. GEMS bonus plan. Not everybody has one of these, but it's important to know that if you have something in the GEMS bonus plan field, then you have to have something in one of these fields. You can't have an entry here and then no entry here. So I'm going to go with, there we go. Okay. Budget, pretty self-explanatory. Currency for, and by the way, you can use the drop-down. They all default to US dollar, but you can use the drop-down and change this to whatever it is that needs to be. Description, again, if you are changing the description, if you're making additions to it, please be sure, and I know it doesn't show up this way usually in production. This is just kind of a glitch in the practice area, but please be sure that you are getting whatever those alterations are approved in writing by HR. Pre-screening, we can click this. We can skip that. Screening, we can skip that. And by the way, you can always use the table of contents. A lot of people don't even know this is here. You can always go up to requisition, click that black drop-down arrow, and then you can just jump to other sections very quickly without having to do all of the scrolling. Very fast that way. So again, if you're in that additional information section, if there's something that you need to be sure gets passed on, then you can put that in additional info. Other than that, I'm going to click my diagnostic. It's going to tell me that everything is ready to be approved. I can save and close. I now have my rec title, rec number. I'm in the draft status, and it's ready for me to send on. More actions, request approval. And of course, your names will probably be obviously different than my names are. Comments are mandatory. Usually it's going to be something very simple, like please approve, please review and approve, something very simple. If you've had a requisition that has been rejected and you have had to rework that requisition, then in your comment area, put in whatever it is that you have fixed, adjusted pay range per whoever it is that asked you to do that. Whatever that comment is, whatever it was rejected for, put that in your comment area. Done. Okay, amend approval path, that's probably something that if you're the initiating manager, you won't mess with. If you're an approving manager, you might, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Send a reminder. If it's been, 24 hours and you don't have an approval, I probably would not send a reminder. But if it's been a couple of days, yeah, you can go in and just click send a reminder. If your boss is on vacation, probably don't do that. Hopefully he or she has set up someone who they have their authority delegated to, and they're taking care of that. But again, if a reasonable period has gone by and you need to send a reminder, you can do that right there. History, you can go into the history tab. You can see every change that has been made to the requisition and who did the change and when it was done. Okay, any questions about completing the requisition or sending it for approval? Okay, so let's keep moving on. And again, I'll stay on afterwards and we can go through some additional questions. But let's move on into approving a requisition. Now again, even if you are not an approving manager, that's okay. It's still a good idea for you to know exactly what it is that your manager sees when he or she is going to approve a requisition. So there are two different ways that this can happen. First of all, when a manager sends a requisition for approval, it just takes a matter of a minute or so before that email is sent out to the approving manager. It's very quick. There's really no lag there. So the approving manager gets an email, and I know that it says that you have to click you have to log into Conduent first before you can be able to do that. If you're not hooked into the network and you click here, I've just found that it brings you to the sign-in page anyway. So that's just been my experience. If that doesn't work for you, then maybe you do have to log in first. I've never actually seen it. I've never been forced to do that. I just click here and then win ID and password. Once you do that, you're going to have a screen. I know this is a little busy here. Let me walk you through this. You're going to have a screen that looks like this PDF in the middle here. Now, the default is going to be approved, but it's really, and I had a couple of different requests to go over this very, very carefully as I do this training. I had people say, we've got people that are just clicking approve without going through and reviewing the requisition. So please be sure you tell them to review the requisition first. I can't imagine not doing that, but I'm going to reinforce that. Click the requisition details. It will bring up a multi-PDF page screen for you where you can go over all of the different details of the requisition. I can't imagine approving it without doing that, but evidently that seems to be happening sometimes. Then when you're done, you can either just click approve and done, or you can use the drop-down, click reject. Be sure, either way you need to make comments, be sure that if you're rejecting the requisition, you're very, very detailed in your comments. I also know of times where a requisition has been rejected, there's been something sort of vague put in the comments, the manager makes the changes that they think are being looked for, and then it gets rejected again. If you are sending one back to be reworked, very detailed, very specific comments, please. Then if you click approve and done, then you'll get a confirmation, and it will automatically head to the next step, the next person in line. The other way to do this is through Taleo, through Careers at Conduent. There, you may have a line that says approve requisition, or you can just go into tasks assigned to me. It'll still get you where you need to go. You'll have a list of approvals. Anything with a red flag next to it is something that you have never looked at before. You've never clicked it and opened it. The other ones that don't have the red flag, they are ones that you have viewed before. You just did not take any action on it if it's still active there. This is just saying, hey, brand new, you've never looked at it before, needs attention here. Rather than just approving the requisition, please open it, do a thorough review of what's in that requisition before you pass it along. Once you do approve, you'll come to this screen where you have the same options, approve, reject, and be sure you put your comments in there as well. You click done to complete that transaction. And if you are the last person in the approval chain, then the status here will change to open and approved. And this is the point at which the recruiter can begin posting the requisition and sourcing candidates once it has gotten all of the approvals. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Here is a view of the email that you get, and I'm just going to click here. And because I'm already on the network, I didn't have to log in at all. If I had not been, I would just have to go through the WinID and password, and then it would bring me to this screen anyway. You want to look at the requisition details. Come on. Probably a little small on your screen here. Let's scroll down some. Here is all of the details that are in the requisition needing to be approved. And once I look at that, I can go back, make my decision if I'm rejecting. If not, it defaults to approve anyway. And if you want to see the path details, you can always do that. And this will tell you where it's been so far. If you are the first approving manager, it's not going to show you anything except the hiring manager. But if you are a little farther, then you can see who has approved it before you and how it got to your desk. So I'm going to put approve requisition. And I'm not going to click done, because if I click done, then it actually marks that it's done in Taleo, and I won't be able to do the second example. But if you clicked done, you would get a confirmation that your decision had been recorded. But I'm going to back out of that and not click done so that I can instead take you through and show you how to do it from here. Okay, so again, you may have one, you may have a line here that it says approve requisition, or you can also go through tasks assigned to me. This would just show me the two waiting for approval. I'm going to go in here so we can see what other tasks look like. Okay, so here I have a couple of additional approvals in other areas that are waiting for me that I have not looked at yet. This is the brand new one, and again, I'm going to go through the requisition itself first. Make sure that everything in here looks so, and it's easier for me to click and edit. I know if you open it up for editing, you could accidentally make a change, but it's just easier for me to view this way. Again, you're going to go through this hopefully much more slowly than I am to make sure that everything in here, all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, everything is 100% complete. Be sure if you're an approving manager that you check Section 7, because you never know who's put information in there that might need your attention, so be sure you check the bottom there. Once you do, I'm going to save and close it again. I'm going to go into amend approval path. And of course, there would be others in normal requisition. There would be multiple listings down here at the bottom, but when it's time for you, you make your decision. Again, reject, put lots of detail, approve. You're going to put comments regardless, but lots of detail if you reject, and done. And that is all there is to approving a requisition. So let's take a second and see if there are any questions about that real quick. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, so let's just do one or two questions. Okay, let's go back into and finish this with the support information. Where do you go when you need help for things? And I'm surprised. It's not a manager's fault for not knowing where this stuff is. It's our fault for not making sure it's communicated to you better. Not enough managers know where the support resources actually are. There's two different sites. There is the learning site. I happen to be looking at the English one because that's what I speak. But there are multiple languages available on this learning site as well. What you do is you select your language, then you select your role, and when you get there, you find your screen. It actually looks a little different than this. I've made some changes to it. But everything you want to know is in here. How do you create a requisition? How do you approve? How do you, if you need to validate the details of a candidate's offer, how do you do that? Managing your personal settings. There's all kinds of information that's in here, including a recording of a session like this one. You can also click the FAQ page I'm going to show you that in just a second, where you get frequently asked questions and the answers are already populated there. So please do yourself a favor and use one of these two sites first before making phone calls or sending off emails, because you can typically find 90% of the time you're going to find what you're looking for here in 5 minutes versus waiting a couple of days before you get the first response from the help desk, and then they may have some clarifying questions that they need to ask before they can start addressing the problem. Let's see how to find it. We're going to go to Conduent Connect. Let's do it again. I will show you how to get to this. Now, again, you can always get to the help information. Just click, and again, I've darkened this, so hopefully in a day or so it'll show up better. But you can just click on the training materials site or the FAQ page site when you're in Taleo, but you can also get to that from Conduent Connect by going to HR Benefits, Learning and Career, and then looking down here for Careers at Conduent. This one, Talent at Conduent. If you need information on goal planning, development planning, end-of-year performance reviews, those kinds of things, that's in the Talent at Conduent. We're looking today, though, at Careers at Conduent. I'm going to click on Training and FAQ. And we need to change this so the home page actually populates, because it should start here instead. There we go. Should start here. If you land on another page, just click Home. Select your language. And then select your role. There's nothing confidential in any of these other, you may think, oh, employees can go to the manager. Yeah, there's nothing confidential in there, just stuff that doesn't apply to them. Select manager. Again, there's a video and a guide on creating requisitions, videos and guides on approving and rejecting. There's both formats in validating offer details, all kinds of information here, and we continue to add things. So, you come back here from time to time and check. You never know what's going to be new that's been added onto here. From either Conduent Connect or from inside Taleo or from right here, you can click on the FAQ page. And there we go. I can't find the right template that I'm looking for. Who can create requisitions? I have an error message. I didn't understand what it meant. Those kinds of things you can find. I mean, you can just see there's tons of information on here. Chances are you will find in one of those two sites an answer to the question that you're looking for. If you can't find it, then you can send that email to the help desk. But again, you'll only be helping yourself if you try and go to one of these two places. Well, that's not true. You'll be helping them too, because they get massive hundreds of emails, and I've seen them, and most of them could have been answered in one of these two sites here. So do yourself and the help desk a favor. Try these sites first before you start shooting those emails off, because most of the time you'll find what you need. Okay, I show we are finishing up about 2 minutes in advance, so that's good. I will be happy to stay on and take some questions if you still